This episode is brought to you by the snowy goodness outside of my window and my reluctance to go out and be in it. I'm going to be going completely unscripted for this one, like I have no notes or anything, so if this is a rambling mess, I'm really sorry. Here's a question that gets asked a lot this time of year. Can we talk about Black Panther for a second? But can we talk about The Last Jedi for a second? But can we talk about Paddington 2 for a second? No, none of those, although they're all very good questions. The question that seems to keep coming up, at least in my friend group, is, hey, what's going to win Best Picture this year? Which is usually met by a sort of low rumble of voices, and then somebody will say an opinion, and somebody will disagree with them, and then there's a battle cry, and next thing you know, the swords have been drawn. It's a pretty contentious issue. Anyway, the thing about films is that they are widely consumed and extremely subjective. So everyone's got an opinion, and everyone thinks that their opinion's right, and I'm not really here to tell anyone that they are right or wrong, because I think that misses some of the more interesting conversations that we have about films. That's why I don't review films. There's also a lot of people who say that the Oscars don't matter. That is, wrong. Technically nothing matters depending on who you are, but in terms of the film industry, in terms of actors' salaries, in terms of film publicity, yes, the Oscars are a pretty big deal. Anyway, with all that being said, I'm gonna voice some opinions about the films that have been nominated for Best Picture. Not a review as such, I'm not gonna tell you whether or not they're bad or good, but I want to talk about my experience with them, how I connected with them, etc, etc. So let's have a conversation about them. This will be a no spoilers chat. If you haven't seen any of these films, that is completely okay. I highly encourage you to go and watch all of these films if you have the time and resources to do so. Let's start with The Post. So what is there to say about The Post? Spielberg is one of the best directors of our time. He might be the greatest director of all time, depending on whom you ask. I'm not here to debate that. And while for me, The Post wasn't the most out there film, it didn't push any boundaries or do anything insane with the medium. It was an extremely well put together film with some amazing performances from a group of filmmakers who just know what they're doing, who just know how to block a scene, and who just know how to put together a film. I know that there's a big push for filmmaking that can be loud and for filmmaking that can be, controversial or very sort of in your face. But there is something to be said about filmmaking technique that is invisible. A filmmaking experience that you can sink into without even realizing. Some would say that that's even better. And again, I'm not here to debate which actually is. Also, this film has everyone's favorite sweetheart, Michael Stuhlbarg. And you're probably thinking right now, oh, who's Michael Stuhlbarg? Oh, he's only in 3 of the Best Picture nominees this year. Like, I know man gets work, but if we could start giving him more attention in the public eye, that would be great, because he's one of the finest working character actors of our time. I don't know how I ended up like this. People are definitely gonna double bill this with All the President's Men, and I feel like it is meant to be a companion piece. Although, if we're being honest, on some level, it did make me want to watch All the President's Men maybe a little bit more. Doesn't mean it's not really good. It's still really good. Moving on to Lady Bird. That's how you say that now, apparently. I've heard a few people saying that Lady Bird shouldn't be nominated for a Best Picture because it's cliched or because it's too simple, and I don't understand those people, because this film is so lovingly put together. It's so carefully crafted, you can just tell when you watch it. Every single character feels fully realized, and the whole film finds this perfect balance between being a very personal love letter to a single person's youth and to growing up in a specific place in a specific time, and also feeling completely familiar and deeply empathetic. Does that make sense? Probably not. I don't care. Point is, there was not a dry eye in my cinema, and the film didn't have to pull out massive tragic events or a big sweeping score to achieve that. It just aimed for a specific set of emotions with pinpoint accuracy, and it hit a bullseye that is worthy of praise. Also, while we're here, saying something is cliche does not make for valid criticism. Just doesn't. Let's move on. Let's talk about Get Out. I've seen Get Out twice now, and it blew me away both times. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised to see it nominated for Best Picture. Not because it's not good, it's absolutely brilliant, but because 1, it's a horror film. Tell me your favorite horror film that's been nominated for Best Picture. 2, it's about racism, but not the friendly, oh, wasn't that crazy back in the day racism. And 3, it is Jordan Peele's directorial debut. Cue mind-blown gif. And much like Lady Bird, which I should point out is Greta Gerwig's solo directorial debut, this film is so carefully woven. Not just in terms of small plot details which you don't pick up until your second time viewing it, but in terms of what those small details have to say about culture and about race and about politics. If the point of films is to make us feel things and think, and I would argue that on some level it definitely is, this one is just crazy town banana pants. It's kind of great to see it on this list. Let's move on to The Darkest Hour, and this is kind of a tough one for me because I'm gonna level with you. I didn't love it. I think that it's very well put together. I think that there are some great performances from, of course, Gary Oldman to Lily James. I think the set design is beautiful. I think that the lighting is really impressive. But ultimately, the film just felt a little bit too loud and I couldn't find myself in it. Going back to what I was saying about films being these very big, very in-your-face experiences, this film begins with a wonderful crane shot through the House of Commons as everyone's arguing and papers are flying, and it's a very big operatic moment. And you think, wow, this is going to be a really big film. But in the next scene, the camera is low angle on a circular table with all these unmotivated panning movements from person to person as this conversation unfolds. And it's very impressive to watch on a scene-by-scene basis, but in the moment, it didn't really string together for me. I don't think I could find myself in all of that. I kept waiting for the film to slow down, and I don't think that the plot itself can justify that kind of momentum. Like, I came out of this film and I asked all my friends, what was your favourite scene? And none of us could really say anything, because it all merges together in a way where nothing can really stand out. The one scene where Churchill sort of breaks away from all the action is the only thing that sort of stood out to me, and that was mostly because it felt like it belonged in a different film. So yeah, the sum of its parts didn't fully work for me, but some beautiful stuff in there. Moving on to The Shape of Water. Gonna be really calm about this one, just really relaxed. I've seen it 4 times. Talking about some of the finest filmmakers of our time, Guillermo del Toro is your boy's up there, and I'm gonna try and find some stuff to say about it that goes beyond, oh lol, she wants to sleep with the fish man, because who among us hasn't from time to time thought about small things. There's not a single static shot in the whole film. Camera is constantly on a crane or a dolly and is slowly drifting or floating as if in water is perhaps a better way to describe it. And the music, oh my god, the music. The soundtrack has character themes. It's got character themes. And this is another film with your boy, Michael Stuhlbarg. He's back, he's back. And this time he's Russian. I feel like this is one of those examples of giving people what they need versus giving people exactly what they want. Because while, yes, I've heard some people who say, oh my god, the fish stuff is really weird, most people I know say the fish stuff is really lovely, and it's all of the other stuff that they don't really get on board with. And while I would argue that yes, the romance of this film is definitely the best part of it, it's in exploring the other things that the film gains meaning and relevance and importance in modern society. The fact that this film is set in 1962, the fact that it takes place in Baltimore, and every single character interaction feels designed to say a singular thing. I'm not going to say what that thing is because you should really go and see it if you haven't, but the result just gets me right here every time. Also, I know a lot of people don't care, but they made this for $19.5 million. What? Okay, let's move on to Tree Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. This really is a contentious one because I see a lot of people who are really in love with everything that this film says, and I see a lot of people who are actively angry at the film. And I've sort of flirted with the idea of being both. And honestly, I'm still not sure where I land. What it comes down to for me is that this is a film about hatred, and it's about malice and prejudice, and where hatred comes from, and the nature of pain, and all of these big things. But if a film wants to discuss prejudice and sort of play around within those waters, I feel like it might need to address its own internal prejudices. And I've only seen Three Billboards once, but simply put, I was kind of turned off by the way it treats its female characters, by the way it treats its black characters, by the way it treats Peter Dinklage. And I guess this comes into the idea of art not existing in a vacuum, because as isolated incidents, I think I would be willing to give the film more leeway. But when you put those against similar sort of treatments of women in Seven Psychopaths, or you look at some of the stuff in Bruges, I find it very hard to be in the film's corner here. I'm not sure if this is just how Martin McDonagh feels. What my friends have argued is that this is all deliberate and it's all existing as a way of stimulating conversation, and the film refuses to give you easy answers. And while I certainly agree with the ending sentiment, and I love that the film doesn't give you any easy answers, I think I'll need to see it again before I can sort of decide if I'm on board with the whole experience. Regardless, Sam Rockwell, Frances McDormand, Woody Harrelson, I don't see him getting enough love for this one, and he's brilliant in it. I encourage you to see it anyway and make up your own mind. Moving on to Dunkirk. I've seen Dunkirk 3 times, and it's not perfect, but hey, how about we stop trying to look for perfect films, because they don't exist. Well, I think the decision to make this a 12A rating, relying on tension and suspense instead of gore, is a sort of brave decision. I'm not sure that it fully works. As one of my friends put it, in a post-Saving Private Ryan landscape, I'm not sure that you can see people lying down like they're playing pretend and really take it completely seriously. With that being said, the overall experience for me was a roller coaster that I didn't want to get off. This is definitely a thrilling experience, it is definitely a heartfelt experience, and I think it might be Nolan's most personal film. That might be a controversial opinion, but yes, I think arguments can be made for that. Personally, I quite like the different time narratives. It just added to the sense of confusion about everything, but in a way that helped connect me with the film, not in a way that felt distracting. Moving on to Call Me By Your Name. Ooh, this one's a little bit pretty, isn't it? I could make a bunch of really cheap metaphors, but I won't. It's like walking through an old museum while thinking of— I said I won't, because I think the beauty of this film is pretty nicely reflected in people's responses to it. I know there has been some discussion about this film's portrayal of the LGBTQ community. I personally can't speak from that perspective. What I will say is, again, it's in the careful crafting of emotion, in the careful crafting of certain relationships, that this film really, really shines. And I do say certain relationships because while all the performances are brilliant, I think certain characters do kind of get shortchanged by the story. I've also only seen this once, and while I warmed to it more afterwards, I was a little distracted in the moment by Armie Hammer's casting. Because he's playing a 24-year-old in this. He is giving this all of the confidence and all of the bravado, all of the false charm, you know, and insecurity of a person still discovering who they are, of a young man. But in terms of pure imagery alone, Armie Hammer Hammer looks like, well, he looks like Armie Hammer, he looks like a fully grown man. With that being said, the result of the film is an experience about first love and first loss that I think most people will relate to, like they haven't with many other films before this. And this is our third strike from your boy Michael Stuhlbarg. He hit it out of the park again, he's gonna... I just really love him a lot. And his closing speech is one that I've watched and cried to a million times over. Not to mention the credits. I'm not gonna say anything, but if you've seen the film, whew, the credits. Let's move on to our final contestant, Phantom Thread. This film is so weird. Not weird like all super out there and crazy, but in the way it maintains just a slightly peculiar tone at all times. It's a perfect balancing act between being completely engulfed in something, but never feeling like you're truly familiar with what you're seeing until you look back on the whole thing and every action feels completely inevitable. I don't want to tell you what this film's about, and honestly, I'm not sure that I could without spoiling the whole thing, but I love the way this film takes influence from gothic romance. I love its depictions of obsession. To say Daniel Day-Lewis is good in a film is kind of a pointless thing now, but I really do think he should get props for this. Leslie Manville is phenomenal. We are big fans of conflicted maternal relationships this Oscar season, and I am here for it. Also, I'm kind of rooting for Shape of Water on this one, but if Johnny Greenwood was to win for the score, I think it would be very well deserved. And I believe that's all of them. I think it's been a really strong year, and I can understand why pretty much every film on this list is nominated. And ultimately, how great is it that we can have such a diverse range of films, with a variety of genres and made by people from all different places with all different experiences, and saying some brilliant things. And how great is it that once a year we are encouraged to go out and explore different stories that we probably wouldn't see. And I think regardless of who goes home with the trophy at the end of the night, I think it is most important to take joy in the experiences you've had, you know, in the things you've learned, in the way you felt with these stories, rather than just pitting them against each other to see which is best. With that being said, let's talk about the big question. What do I think is going to win Best Picture? Paddington 2. What do you mean it's not? Well, that's my answer and I'm sticking with it. If you want to see me ramble about Paddington 2 the way that I have rambled about all of these, I have it as a bonus video for all of my patrons, which you can find here. The short and sweet of it is, oh, it's so good. But if you want a bit more detail, you can find that on my Patreon. For now, I am Sam, that was some stuff. I will see you next time.